It's time now for the World Brief and a review of some of the headlines from today's newspapers from around the world. Friends, let me tell you what's happening around the world. Well, let's begin in Minneapolis. It's in the US state of Minnesota, and that's where a US immigration officer fatally shot a woman, sparking protests and condemnation from local officials. It was over in seconds. 3 shots fired by an immigration officer towards a woman who was in her car, appearing to drive away from the scene. The victim is a US citizen, a 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. She is a married mother of a 6-year-old child, according to reports. Now, the incident occurred during a major immigration enforcement operation with over 2,000 federal agents deployed to the area. Now, the Department of Homeland Security claims the shooting happened as a violent rioter attempted to run over an immigration officer, but Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey disputes this account. DHS says the officer, fearing for his life, opened fire, while Frey says the victim was not trying to ram anybody. However, Governor Tim Walz has demanded an investigation, saying the state will ensure accountability and justice. Now, the city's police chief also urged protesters to remain peaceful. Now, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, who I just mentioned, he had some very strong words about the situation and for ICE itself. Let's take a listen.
There's little I can say, again, that'll make this situation better, but I do have a message for our community, for our city, and I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite. People are being hurt. Families are being ripped apart. Long-term Minneapolis residents that have contributed so greatly to our city, to our culture, to our economy are being terrorized, and now somebody is dead.
Some very strong words there from the Minneapolis mayor. But on the other hand, US President Donald Trump has defended the ICE agent, as has Kristi Noem, who is, of course, as we know, the Director of Homeland Security. She described the victim as a domestic terrorist. Now, this immigration crackdown in Minneapolis has recently targeted the Somali community as the Trump presidency continues its mission to make America great again. Well, let's move on now. Still talking about the United States, though, and we do know that the United States has seized a Russian-flagged oil tanker. It's called the Marinera in the North Atlantic. It's been accusing it of breaking American sanctions and shipping Iranian oil. Now, the vessel, previously known as the Bella One, was intercepted by U.S. forces after attempting to evade boarding in the Caribbean last month. The UK military supported the operation with air surveillance and a Navy ship. Now, the White House claims the Marinera was deemed stateless after flying a false flag, while Russia says it had granted the vessel temporary permission to sail under its flag on the 24th of December. Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the Marinera's crew will be investigated for fleeing the Coast Guard and may face prosecution. Notably, the U.S. has also seized another tanker. That tanker is called the Sophia, and it took it in the Caribbean, accusing it of illicit activities, as both vessels are part of a shadow fleet used to evade sanctions on oil. Now, from one resource to another. Nestle is recalling batches of its infant nutrition products, milk, baby milk, including SMA, Biba and Nan formulas in 25 countries due to possible contamination with a toxin that can cause nausea and vomiting. Now, the recall, which began in December, affects products sold across Europe, Turkey, Argentina, the entirety of Africa, the Americas, and Asia. However, no illnesses have been confirmed in connection with the recalled products, so it hasn't been publicly reported as yet. Now, the toxin cereulide is produced by some strains of the Bacillus cereus and can cause food poisoning symptoms, including vomiting and stomach cramps. Nestle says it identified the potential risk at one factory in the Netherlands and is working to minimize supply disruption. Notably, Austria's health ministry says the recall is the largest in Nestle history, affecting over 8,000 products from more than 10 factories. Meanwhile, Nestle is ramping up production using alternative suppliers and accelerating release of unaffected products to maintain supply. Well, those were our World Brief stories. Before we start our discussion, let's take a look at our newspaper headlines from across the globe. As ever, we begin here in Nigeria with This Day. And This Day leads with the reports that the United States has, issued this visa bond requirement for Nigerians and nationals of 37 countries. Affected B1 and B2 visa applicants will be required to pay a bond between $5,000 and $15,000 depending on assessment. The payment is refundable if visa conditions are met, but it does not guarantee visa approval, as applications may still be denied after payment. The policy takes effect for Nigerians from the 21st of January 2026. Now, This Day also reports that the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Waidi Shaibu, toured Niger State, pledging more troops, technology and collaboration with traditional rulers to tackle insecurity. That's as at least 9 people were killed by suspected bandits and herdsmen in Oyo, several people in Benue and Niger States too. Meanwhile, police rescued 76 children from a kidnap plot in Kaduna, and Niger State extended school closures in its northern zone over security concerns. We've got a double whammy now. We've got the Daily Trust and the Daily Independent side by side. Both of those papers report that a federal high court judge, Justice Emeka Nwite, has disclosed attempts to bribe him over the EFCC case against former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, his wife and son, warning that any effort to compromise him would be resisted. The court granted them each 500 million naira bail, ordered Malami's temporary remand pending bail conditions, and separately approved the interim forfeiture of 57 properties worth about 213 billion naira, allegedly linked to Malami and his sons. Now, the Daily Independent reports that the ICPC will continue probing former NMDPR boss Farouk Ahmed despite Aliko Dangote withdrawing his corruption petition. The commission says investigations had already begun and will proceed in the interest of transparency and accountability. Let's take a look at the Punch. The Punch reports that under the new VAT formula starting on January 2026, Nigeria's 36 states are set to receive an estimated 5.07 trillion naira from value-added tax VAT. That's up from 3.47 trillion in 2025. That's as the federal government's share drops from 15% to 10%. Local governments will continue to receive 35%. The reform, which is part of the 2026-2028 medium-term expenditure framework, also affects stamp duty revenues, increasing states' share from 250.84 billion naira in 2026. Now, the VAT pool grows. While it does grow, the IMF and Nigerian Economic Summit Group warn that maintaining the current VAT rate could reduce federal revenue, but the reform strengthens fiscal federalism by giving subnational governments a larger share of consumption-driven taxes. Now, let's take a look at the New Telegraph. Meanwhile, the New Telegraph does report that the NLC has slammed the federal government's new tax laws and rising borrowings, warning that policies made without Labour's inputs are worsening poverty and undermining democracy. Moving on to the Vanguard, and we're back to talking politics. The PDP intends to hold talks with former presidential candidates Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi to form a stronger opposition ahead of the 2027 elections. However, Atiku's camp insists he remains committed to the ADC, while the Obedient Movement says the PDP's internal crises make it unlikely Obi would return. Now, let's take a look at our UK papers. The Daily Telegraph has Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch promising to abolish business rates for thousands of pubs, which are under threat from a push to lower the drink driving limit. And the iPaper leads on America's capture of that Russian-flagged oil tanker with the help of the United Kingdom, reporting that Britain stands ready to seize more of Vladimir Putin's shadow ships. And I guess that brings us nicely back to our World Brief stories. So, Dr. Rubin, I've been by. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I mean, I watched sort of aghast and in awe as the story unfolded of this this ship that was being, at the time it was being pursued before it was eventually captured. And unfortunately now, because we're in the era of AI, when you see certain videos online, you no longer know which is the real representation of what happened and which is the AI version of it. However, there were several dramatic videos that played out online to illustrate what happened or what could have possibly happened. Now, when you follow the journey of this Marinera, which had initially started as the Bella 1 from Iran, and it went in through the Bab el-Mandeb, Strait of Hormuz, which is, of course, that strategic area that we made reference to. I believe Dr. Abati made reference to it yesterday when we were talking about Somaliland, the Horn of Africa, going around Yemen, going through the Middle East, Suez Canal, Red Sea, and that's the journey it took before, bursting out through the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic and heading down towards Venezuela before being repelled by the U.S. blockade, doing a U-turn. And then when it now was blocked in close to Venezuelan waters is when we saw that it went off it went into dark mode or shadow mode, as they would call it, before later resurfacing, still headed up. Now, for me, what I found interesting is where it was headed. So it was headed to what is called the GI-UK gap, which is the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. This is a piece of maritime and airspace that is hugely, hugely strategic and valuable when it comes to Russian and NATO military movements, because this is the corridor that, especially if Russia wants to move anything, they need this corridor, whether it be submarines and so forth. And there were some reports that this ship was protected by Russian submarines. But the question is, if there were Russian submarines escorting it, why didn't they react to the action that was taking place at the time? So, I believe that this is still a developing story, because I think it would be naive for us to believe that Russia, if truly this is a Russian vessel, because again, the reports are still vague. I know the media have gone on to declare that it's Russian, but some people are saying Russian flagged. But will there be a response? Will there be retaliation? On the United States front, what we know that following this, Donald Trump made an announcement that the U.S. defense budget for 2027, he hopes, because the 2026 one hasn't even been passed yet. However, he says that it will jump up by 50%. For the first time in history, we will see a U.S. defense spend of $1.5 trillion US dollars. Now, this is also juxtaposed to what happened in the House of Commons yesterday, with Keir Starmer also saying that he's also about to make a defense increase in his own budget, which will surpass anything we've seen since the Cold War. So in all intents and purposes, there is an arms race currently going on with the global powers battling to see how they can increase their military spending. How does this end? It's concerning because everybody is preparing for war. Very quickly on there was a story of Oyo. I think we just need to continue to pay attention to, as the fight against insurgency is happening in some parts of the country, to make sure that those people are not being repelled into other parts
areas,
of the country, especially moving south and west.
Okay, let me start with the issue in the North Atlantic, where the American troops boarded the Marinera, and also in the Caribbean, where they boarded the MVT Sofia, which they said are shadow fleet carrying Venezuelan oil and also Iranian oil. You must note that this is coming against the backdrop of the attack on Venezuela, the seizure, capture, extraordinary rendition of the president of Venezuela and his wife, and also the blockade of the coastal corridor leading to Venezuela. Now, the issue about the reaction, America is saying that any vessel carrying any sanctioned illegal, product, crude oil, anywhere in the world will be seized by America if it is, associated with Venezuela. The same Venezuela that America is planning to steal up to about 50 million barrels of crude oil worth about 2 billion. So in this particular case, you have this latest incident. There have been reactions. Now, Russia is saying that under international law, if a vessel is, flying the flag of a country, and that in their particular case, their flag was sanctioned with particular reference to the Menanrera, and that all the Russian crew on that vessel should be allowed to return to the country and that nothing must happen to them. And this is the geopolitical tension. Yesterday, I had said that the Russian foreign ministry spokesperson had also said that Russia has significant interest in Venezuela and that they do not expect that to be affected in one way or the other. So this is the thing about the, I've not even started speaking.
Sorry, Dr. Rubin, go. Continue.
Yeah, so this is the thing about, the global tension that we talk about. So, but the U.S., the Congress, is going to meet next week to talk about the War Powers Resolution, which is a discussion around the powers of the Congress, to allow the President of the United States to act one way or the other. But the relevant thing here that the Russians are talking about is Article 2, Sub 4 of the of UNCLOS, which is the law of the sea, and also the UN Charter, Article 2.4 of the UN Charter, saying that no country can use force against another country in the international waters. You have territorial waters. Yes. You have the ICs, which is the common heritage of mankind. So these are the some of the international law issues that are related in this regard. As for the crisis in the state of Minnesota, now, okay, the lady that was killed, Miss Good, right? Now, you see that there's a clampdown. They call it Operation Metro Surge. After President Trump decided to descend on, the Somali population in the twin cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, accusing them of welfare fraud. Now the Homeland Security and also ICE and also Border Patrol, they are having their biggest operation in the state of Minnesota. 2,000 additional federal agents have been deployed to that state, to such an extent that people living in the state of Minnesota can't even go to grocery stores anymore. They can't even go out publicly so that they won't be abducted and classified as illegal migrants. That is the context in this particular case. President Trump is also fighting Ilhan Omar, the Somali representative in Congress. And also, you now have this division between Republicans and Democrats about whether there's welfare service fraud in the state of Minnesota or not, and whether Somalians are fraudulent people or not, and whether indeed these illegal immigrants should be ported out of the United States. But the irony is that most of the Somali migrants in that state, they are U.S. citizens. It's not been disclosed yet whether Ms. Good is Somali or not. But there is a state of anxiety in the state of Minnesota where ICE is having its largest operation. And it's a reflection of President Trump's anti-globalism, anti-immigrant policies. But we're told that the FBI is already investigating this particular incident. But there's division, not just in Minnesota, but also in New York, in New Orleans, between Republicans and Democrats on this issue of keep out illegal immigrants. So America, under Trump, is not just fighting within the country, it's also fighting outside. And it is therefore not surprising that the same President Trump is saying defense spending must be ramped up, and that defense companies, arms manufacturing companies that do not ramp up their budgets and activities would, have reduced federal funding, and that pay for executives, particularly in some of the companies like Cartier, should be reduced. So you have this insularity, this provincialism, creating problems even within American borders itself.
Dr. Rubin. Thank you for being by.
Thank you, Adefemi.
I'm about to say see you later.
So, no. Right here with us for the long haul.